So one of the great sources of information for gun-related stuff is Dr. John Lott with his Crime Prevention Research Center, because it's difficult to find. You guys all know this. It's hard to find accurate, correct information when it relates to Second Amendment or guns, or I'm not going to use that stupid gun violence term, but things involving firearms and stuff like that. It's hard to find good information, and a lot of people, like, we're immersed in it. If you're an instructor, or if you're at least even a gun owner, a lot of times you look at some of the stuff and you just know, okay, that sounds goofy or that's not right. But if you think about a lot of people that aren't gun owners or that don't have close family members that are gun owners, they're going by what they see in the media, and that stuff is intentionally wrong a lot of the time. So that's why I like to highlight, when Dr. Lott will come out with something pretty regularly. But a lot of what he does is he'll debunk a lot of the goofiness that's out there. So one of the things, when it concerns concealed carry, something that John Lott just came out with, a new study looking at how often concealed carriers actually stop active shooters, and it's
a lot.
Yeah, it's much different than what you would hear. It's like out of his research, it says that civilians stop these shootings more often than police do, and there's different reasons for that. But I think the ratio is like 51.5% for civilians versus 44.6% for police. And it's interesting too, in terms of how dangerous it is. They say police are 6 times more likely to be killed by an active shooter and 17 times more likely to be wounded than a civilian. And a lot of that has to do with they're in uniform, so they're more obvious targets than civilians are. But still, it's interesting. The information that he finds is contrary to what a lot of people might think, not knowing any better.
Well, not only what a lot of people might think, but what media and the FBI statistics would have you believe, right? The FBI misclassified a ton of these incidents and really kind of downplayed the impact that armed civilians have in stopping these active shooters.
How did they misclassify that, some of these instances?
Well, I know. I mean, I could respond to one part of that anyway with the FBI stuff, and it's unfortunate because their uniform code of crime statistics used to be really, really good. I used to reference that a lot in my articles. Mm-hmm. And then in the last, I want to say 3 years or so, part of what happened is they switched over to a different software system. And a lot of cities could not upload their crime information, their data. And that was why, the last couple of years in the Biden administration, they were talking about how crime was down and this and that and citing the FBI. Well, yeah, it's because major cities, including Los Angeles, Chicago, and New York, couldn't upload their information. And it had to do with, I guess it was real labor intensive, so they didn't have the staff to do it. And then there were issues with getting into the new software. So they say they're starting to get that fixed with this year. So we'll see if that goes back up. But I know the other thing I noticed too with the new software, the format before used to be really easy to look at. Like I would go in and I could look up violent crime by weapon, by city, by region, and they were nice spreadsheets, and it was real easy to find the data. I found the last year or two looking in there, it was much, much more difficult to find anything. So that's unfortunate, but that's part of the misinformation.
Well, I wanted, because the study talks a lot about an active shooter. And the FBI says here, the FBI defines an active shooting as an event where an individual actively attempts to kill people in a public place, excluding shootings tied to robberies or gang violence. An active shooting could be as simple as a single shot fired at a lone human target, even if the shooter misses, to a mass shooting. the Crime Prevention Research Center, that's John Lott, findings tell a very different story than the narrative you'll see on television. And this was interesting. Of the 180 total instances where an armed civilian stopped an active shooting, did permit holders end up accidentally shooting bystanders? In just one case out of 180. Did they interfere with police? In 0 cases out of the 180 did they interfere with police. Did they lose their lives in the confrontation? Out of 180, in only 2 cases, or about 1%, were they injured while saving lives. In 44 cases, or about 24%, they were injured. And it doesn't really talk about the severity of the injury. Was the shooting they prevented likely to be a mass public shooting? In 58 cases, or about a third, 32%, they've stopped what most likely would have become a mass shooting. And did they have their gun taken away? There's only one case in 180 where their firearm was actually taken away. And I'm assuming what they meant there is taken away, not by the police, but taken away by a bad guy or somebody, to prevent them.
Yeah, and to kind of look at the other side of that, when police stopped active shooters, they shot the wrong person, either another police officer or a civilian, 4 times, which compared to the civilians only doing that 1 time, right? So a difference there. And then also police were shot and wounded 28% of the time, whereas civilians were only shot and wounded 24% of the time. And then police were shot and killed 7% of the time, where civilians were shot and killed only 1% of the time. Wow. So very interesting there.
Yeah, and the other thing too with the misinformation is that's why the work that Dr. Lott and others do is so important. I don't know if you guys saw, there's a new study now that's being flashed around the mainstream media that it says 1 in 15 Americans have survived a mass shooting incident.
Yes.
Have you guys seen that?
Yes, it's all over 15. The place.
Yeah, that's what are your thoughts on that?
That's a lifetime experience. So that means there's if there's 340 million people in the country, roughly 22 million of us have survived a mass shooting incident. Jeez. Which is, it's just nonsense. But if you look at that, if you read through the report, again, it comes from I don't get my reports mixed up. I think this was the one that was published in the Journal of the American Medical Association.
JAMA.
And it's written by 3 psychologists / professor type people, funded by 3 universities. And if you look at where all the data comes from, it's all from it's from Google Scholar. So I guess that's probably a legitimate search engine, I suppose. But it's interesting because you see like how they provide, or they define a mass shooting incident as 4 more people shot.
Yes.
Is what they're talking about. Nobody killed necessarily, just shot, and it includes gang violence, crimes. It includes everything. And the other thing too is having survived meant either you saw it or you could just hear gunfire. If you heard gunfire, you survived a mass shooting incident. And I'm on the range at least once a week, and I hear things in Lakeside probably every month or 2 that could be gunfire. I can't tell. Did I hear gunfire for real? I don't know. But it's interesting because they throw those numbers out there, and for people that don't know any better, they believe that kind of stuff. And what's bad is when people believe that kind of stuff. Even like, I don't know if you guys saw, there was a bill introduced the other day in California, AB 1092. This woman's Republican assembly person wanted to extend the renewal time from 2 years to 4 years for CCW.
Yeah.
The thing was killed in committee, in the Public Safety Committee. Yeah. Never even got out of there. And part of it is that these people are just nasty and they know better. But another part of it is just ignorance out there. It's like with the stuff that we're dealing with now with the sensitive area stuff. You'll see comments, from the anti-gun people about, these gun people want to have, guns on our playgrounds. They talk about parks now. Technically, we're banned from parks. But in Albuquerque last week, 14 people were just shot in the park in an event. So, if I want to go to a park to some event with my family, I can't protect myself. And a lot of that is just the misunderstanding, the idea that because I have a gun and it's in a holster, that it somehow poses some threat to people or makes the place, less safe. And when you see stuff like what John Lott came out with, the truth is actually the opposite of that. And it's a shame people don't know it. So I think our job is to get that word out to people.
He does do a really good job. He's done a number of pieces where he kind of debunks, I guess is maybe the best term, where he looks at definitions, FBI statistics, that sort of thing. One of the things that's always interesting to me is when they talk about, how many mass shootings or how many school shootings there are, and I think to myself, maybe there'll be some kind of shooting, some kind of mass murder, whatever, at a school, and they'll talk about it on the news, and they say something like, well, this is the 150th school shooting of the year or something like that. And I think to myself, I don't remember hearing 150 of these stories. What exactly is going on? Well, John Lott found out that the way they define what a school shooting is extremely broad. If you had a couple of drug dealers and a couple of rival drug dealers who were in the parking lot of a school at midnight, on a Saturday night, and there was a shooting, then they would consider that a school shooting. Even though school wasn't in session, there were no kids. These were, this isn't what we would think of when we think of a school shooting or what has become to be called a school shooting. And they don't do this because they don't distort these definitions because they're trying to get to truth or they're trying to, make things better. They do this because there's an irrational fear and dislike of firearms. And of course, the idea of people owning firearms and carrying them for self-defense.
Yeah, and that's what I think too. It's it's important for gun owners to get out because I'm pretty harsh when I talk to students about this. Because it's our fault. We have what we have because gun owners did nothing for the most part for the last 50 years and let this, this misinformation, this nonsense, this propaganda get out there. And now it's a big problem. And we're fighting, we're winning, but, we're still fighting an uphill battle that it's unfortunate we shouldn't even have to fight. Because, I'll talk to people at class, and I'll say that. I'll say, hey, it's our fault. We have this. And, the response will get, well, I didn't vote for Newsom. And my response to that is, well, okay, well, what did you do to get other people not to vote for him? What did you do to support other, normal candidates? Did you support organizations like San Diego County Gun Owners? And, the most of the reaction is, well, no, I didn't do anything. I just want to shoot my gun. And well, that's the problem, and
Yeah.
we don't get out there, and it's frustrating because it's hard trying to show these people why you have to be motivated. You have to fix this stuff. We created it, so we have to fix it. So it's a little bit frustrating, but we do what we can here.
Sam, what do you got? You got any thoughts on this?
No, not on the California specific aspects of this, but to the thing about statistics, I think a lot of why some of these factoids become common knowledge despite being misleading or completely untrue in some cases is because many people just don't know any better.
Right.
They hear something on the news or they see something online or on social media or what have you, and they go, oh, well, geez, that's really bad. And then they repost it if it's on social media or otherwise just sort of tuck it away in the backs of their minds. And that becomes a part of their political consciousness, their political thought process, regardless of whether or not it's true. And this is a phenomenon which is not restricted to the Second Amendment debate. It happens with everything, but this area is particularly rife with that kind of thing happening.
Yeah.
I think another piece of this is that we've allowed so-called experts to not actually be experts in this field. So like all of these articles that we read or even the crimeresearch.org article that kind of goes through the study. It's quoting the Washington Post and New York Times and these supposed experts they had on this topic. One of the quotes I thought was particularly funny is a law professor at Indiana University in Bloomington who said, quote, "I think you might get more individuals carrying sort of primed for something to happen, which is particularly dangerous. In reality, that's the job of the police." And we just let somebody say something crazy like that and publish it for everybody to read and potentially, believe. And, if we just take a little tiny bit of thought and dive into that a little bit, what if the police aren't there? How long does it take for police to show up? Would you, and I'm saying you as in like, if you have a friend who believes that people shouldn't carry guns, you can walk them through this conversation. But like, would you like somebody with a gun to be there right now if you hear shots where you are? No. And everybody is going to answer that question. Yes, I want the gun there as fast as it can possibly get there. Does it matter who holds the gun? To that person in that moment, no, it does not matter who holds the gun. If it's a civilian or a law enforcement officer, they don't care. They just want somebody with a gun stopping the bad guy as fast as possible. And so, we can kind of very quickly dig into these types of belief systems of like, well, the only people equipped for this are the police. Really? Are those the only people who can stop a mass shooting? That's not true. We see, statistically speaking, that's not true. Civilians stop active shooters often, and there are so many news articles and headlines that say things like, very rare for an armed civilian to stop an active shooting, and it's not rare. And we need to start fighting back against the blind belief that anything you see in an article or in a study is true, and start being vocal about it. Be vocal on your social media, put good information out there and encourage your friends who are gun curious or, maybe don't really have a strong opinion on things like this to think about what they would want if it was their life in danger. They want anybody with a gun showing up and stopping the gunman before he kills them.
Yeah, the idea that, too many quote unquote experts give an opinion and it goes unchallenged. I was at a panel discussion once, and the moderator was letting one of the anti-gun folks talk. And I remember she said, this is years ago, she said, I know about guns because my dad was in the Army. Mm-hmm. And the moderator said, oh, all right, okay, yeah. And I'm going, wait a minute. Your dad was in the Army, so you're a firearms expert? Like, what job in the Army requires you to go home and teach your daughter, to be an expert in firearms? But they just pass that off as, okay, well then, that's valid, which is completely ridiculous. And, doing more challenging of a person's quote-unquote expertise, I think, is definitely something that's necessary. The other part of it is how much is subjective. When someone says that, there are too many of this or this very rarely happens, well, that's your opinion, whether or not it's rare. Statistically, what are we talking about here? What are the actual numbers? But those kinds of challenges, I think, are crucial and extremely important. Joe, what else stood out from your article or from this study? What else did you find super interesting?
From John, I think you hit most of the notes I had down.
Yeah. Okay.
But
where did you find this? Where can people go to find the study?
So again, where I found that, because I support Dr. Lott's Crime Prevention Research Center, so I get it in email every time he comes out with something. But, I republished the link to it in my Substack at getagrip.substack.com, so you can find it there. It was in the Federalist, I think, is where the article came from, where he talks about his study. So there's different places that you could find that out there. So those are the three areas that I found it in anyway.
Great. Perfect. Hey, thanks for watching Gun Owners Radio. I hope you loved that clip. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and follow us on social media, and check out our website at gunownersradio.com.